Hello. Happy Friday, everyone. I am going to hang out for a minute and let folks join us. We are live on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. So let me give a few moments for folks to join. For anyone who I've not had the pleasure of meeting before, I am Miata Idoga, and I am the CEO and founder of Abundance Bound. Abundance Bound is a financial education company specifically for non-traditional earners, people who do not get a paycheck every 2 weeks or have guaranteed benefits. These are actors, artists, creative professionals of all kinds, entrepreneurs, gig economy workers. The list goes on, but we have been serving this audience with financial education and guidance for the last 18 years, which I can hardly believe. We actually received, let me count, how many questions? I feel like maybe this is catching on a bit. We got 5 questions. We were sent 5 questions in advance. And of course, I am also here to take any questions live that anyone shows up with or wants me to address. So let me just recap what we have covered so far. So we launched a series that we are calling Riding the Storm, and we launched this series now just about 4 or 5 weeks ago with our financial survival guide during the strikes. And during that initial webinar, which is absolutely available for you to download, for those completely free, for those of you who are joining us on Instagram, you can find the link for that in our bio. For those of you joining us right now from YouTube and Facebook, you can just email info@abundancebound.com if you're not on Instagram, and just ask us and we will email you the link to that recording. But in that recording, we basically covered 5 main topics. We talked about your mindset, your money mindset, having a willingness to actively nurture and strengthen your mindset. That is a critical piece of money management, especially in difficult times. We showed you how to get clarity on your number. This is where you really just follow some very simple steps to make sure that you have as much clarity as possible on your monthly expenses. And I like to say as much clarity as possible, as quickly as possible, so that you can take the next action towards financial stability. We just got kicked off of Instagram. I don't know why that happens. So let me try again. Sorry, forgive me, everyone joining us on Facebook and YouTube. Give me a moment to go live again on Instagram. Let's see, I think that is connecting. It's always Instagram. That's the tricky one. Okay, great. We are connected again. Then we covered taming your debt. This is a big one. Whether you are struggling with debt now because of the strikes, or whether you have been challenged by debt for some time as a non-traditional earner, that is a topic that is just really important, because debt can be this weight that keeps us from having the energy, honestly, the spirit to focus on all of the other things that we're up to in the world. So that's our third topic, and I want to particularly draw attention to that today, because you can still grab the recording of the in-depth webinar that we did specifically on taming your debt. You can still grab that recording. Again, if you're joining us on Instagram, please just click on the link in our bio and you can click to access the recording for taming your debt. And I see that we have a number of people joining us today from Facebook, and also, we have a handful joining us from YouTube as well. So those two social media sites don't have the easiest place for us to share links. So please, if you're joining us from those platforms and you want the Taming Your Debt recording or the Financial Survival Guide During the Strikes, just shoot us an email to info@abundancebound.com, or you can direct message us, and we're happy to send you the links to that as well. So those are the topics that we've covered in depth so far. This coming Wednesday, we are diving into the fourth topic that we introduced in your Financial Survival Guide, and that is around your runway. This is where you determine how much time can you sustain. First, if you earned no money at all, that's something that we want you to have total clarity on. But then what we're also going to be talking about is strategically, how do you lengthen that time? So think of yourself as a plane. You're landing a plane. You want to land the plane as safely and smoothly as possible. And that means that we want you to have as long a runway as possible. And so in our live webinar on Wednesday, we're going to be really diving deep into how do you strategically lengthen your runway. So I invite you to register to join us for that live. And of course, if you're unable to join live, but you register, we'll make sure that you get the recording for that as soon as possible after Wednesday. And then the last topic in the Financial Survival Guide During the Strikes is around earning. And I want to just give you a heads up that we have a number of really exciting activities, events planned for October, specifically around the topic of earning, creating multiple streams of income, because we believe that this is one of the most critical things that all of us as non-traditional earners can do to really solidify and strengthen our ability to keep doing whatever it is that we are called to do in the world. So those are the 5 topics, and I am going live every single Friday for as long as these strikes continue to answer your questions about any of these 5 topics, really any financial challenge that you are having. We know that these strikes are affecting a large percentage of the Abundance Bound community, and specifically, obviously, the members of the entertainment industry. And we want to make ourselves available during this time to really answer the questions that are helpful to you. So, forgive me. For those of you who are joining us live on Instagram, you can copy and paste your question. You can just type your question directly into the chat. I'm going to type hi so that you see that message, and you can just add to the chat with anything that you'd love for me to help you with today. For those of you on Facebook, I'm also going ahead and I'm going to open the chat here. So you should see a place on your screen that you can also put a question in the chat. And unfortunately, for those of you joining us live from YouTube, there is not a place for you to send questions. So you would have to email us the questions to info@abundancebound.com. Now, as I shared, this week, we were sent 5 questions in advance. So again, I feel like maybe this is taking off a little bit, and I really appreciate these questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the first one that we were sent, but I really want to give everyone who's here, who's joining us live, the opportunity to just share a question in the chat, and I will absolutely shift from these ones that we were sent in advance and address your question while you are here live, so that if there's any clarification you need, you have the ability for me to provide the clarification right here while you're here with us. So the first question that we were sent, this person said, in the Riding the Storm series, you talked about the importance of a financial safety net. How can someone start building an emergency fund during these challenging times when it feels like every penny is already accounted for? And I really love and appreciate this question because my answer is, you really, in my opinion, this is not going to be the time when you will start building an emergency fund, okay? Just being completely honest, I think it is true that for many, many people, really anyone who is being financially impacted by these strikes or any financial crisis, right? This is a particular financial crisis, but what we want is we want you to be prepared for financial crises that will happen in the future. During the crisis itself is not when we are going to be focusing on preparing for the next crisis. What we do is, in between the times, that is when we're absolutely focused on building a cushion, building a stronger foundation as a non-traditional earner. Because guys, things happen to everybody, right? Whether you're a traditional earner or a non-traditional earner, there are always going to be things that will happen. Illness, national emergencies, things like global pandemics, which we experienced 3 years ago. That is not something that is particular to being a non-traditional earner. But non-traditional earners, we struggle with instability all the time, right? So, and that means that our job in terms of strengthening the foundation is even more critical, because what we're looking to do is to smooth out earnings that are really always going to be like this. That's the nature of being a non-traditional earner. So what we're looking to do is to really build and strengthen our cushions so that when these bigger crises happen, we are more prepared for them. Okay, so I absolutely don't want you to burden yourself energetically during the crisis itself with, oh my gosh, I should also be doing more. Okay, the crisis is really when we are called on to basically now utilize the resources that we have put in place. And our job is just to kind of tighten and get as much clarity as possible and as much focus as possible to preserve those resources, but we're not putting energy on trying to build the resources, if that makes sense. And this is definitely something that we'll talk about more on Wednesday when it comes to your runway, because what we're doing is we're looking for strategic ways to conserve our resources by doing things like tightening around our expenses. We're also absolutely going to be looking at, is there any are there any resources that are available to us in terms of assistance? And of course, we're going to be looking at earnings, right? But all of that is about stretching out your runway for this particular crisis. It's not about building the emergency fund for the next one. Okay, so hopefully that helps just take some pressure off, in that we want to really focus our energy on this moment at hand. And of course, everyone, we will, in an ideal world, you'll come out of this crisis with still some resources in place. But if you don't, that's fine. We will start exactly where you are. But the behaviors, the things that you're practicing during this time that we covered in your survival guide during the strikes. Again, anyone who's here who hasn't yet gotten a chance to watch that recording, please grab it and watch it. But the skills you're building here are what are going to help you strengthen for the next time, okay? So great. I see a question that has just come through in the chat, so I'll take this one next before going on to the next one we were sent. Geico won't remove a collection for a vehicle that you lost the previous calendar year. It cost you 75 points to your credit. How to remove it and restore your credit quickly. Okay. So in general, my answer here is going to be maybe not the answer that you're looking for, which is that no collection agency, no creditor, as it were, is required to remove a collection. It's before a certain period of time. And there are different periods of time based on the specific kind of debt that it is. But it usually is around 4 years, okay? So if there's collections for money that you owe, unfortunately, there's nothing that you can do to make them remove it. Now, something that is possible is that you can contest what are actually errors on your credit report. So if you feel, or if in actuality, right, there were circumstances that debt should actually have been erased. And this is a tricky one. And again, feel free to give me additional details if you want to. But in the case of where, so I'm just going to make some assumptions here. When you say collection for a vehicle that was lost the previous calendar year. Okay. So let's say that I buy a car, right? And I'm going to say it's 2023 right now, so 2022. Let's say that I bought the car in, I'm just going to make this up, 2017, okay? So I bought the car in 2017, so in 2022, it was 5 years old, or or if I had bought it used, whatever. But let's just say I bought a new car in 2017, and in 2022, it was 5 years old. And let's say that to buy that car, I took out a loan. And let's say I took out a 7-year loan. So I was going to be paying for that car from 2017 until 2024, okay? And then let's say that something happens, there is an accident or a theft, and the car is completely lost to me in 2022. So I still have 2 years worth of repayments on the loan, but I no longer have the car. That is one of those extremely unfortunate situations where you actually do still have responsibility for the 2 years remaining on the loan. So one of the things that is possible for us to purchase is what is called gap insurance, right? So one of the things that is possible is that we can pay for an insurance policy that basically covers the gap between whatever we get from our insurance for the loss. So if a vehicle is term totaled, and whatever we still owe on the car. Because what can absolutely happen is that you can be upside down on a car so that you still owe more money than the car is actually worth at the time of loss, okay? So this is one of those risks. One of the things we talk about a lot in the Abundance Bound community is that it's really important to be in what we call the power cycle, to have as much information as possible, to have clarity about the financial situation and the parameters of different financial moves that we may make. Okay, so this is great. So this person with the question, Breakthrough Horizon, you've provided some clarification that actually shows that I'm sort of, I think, going off on a wrong track. But since you raised something that some people may have questions about, I'm going to go ahead and just sort of briefly finish this track. Okay. So, because we see this happen a lot, okay? So, in that case, if we didn't have the gap insurance, which, just to be really honest, many of us opt not to buy that gap insurance because of the cost, and we're trying to conserve costs without fully understanding the risk that might be in place. Okay. So if that were to happen, unfortunately, you would still have to pay the debt that was owed, right? And if you were unable to pay the debt and then it showed up on your report as being in collections, it would be very difficult to get them to remove it. All right. So now I want to address, this is why I love when you're here, because we can get clarifying. Okay, you bought with cash, there was no loan. They're demanding insurance monthly payments the year after it was lost. Okay, so that's really fascinating. And usually when I use the word fascinating, my children now know I mean fascinating as in kind of like gross, like how are they doing this? So this is one of those cases where my suggestion would be they're demanding insurance monthly payments the year after it was lost. Okay. So to my mind, if you have proof that the car was lost, that it was not on the road, what I'm assuming is that Geico is is relying on some small print in some sort of contract that they say, you agreed to when you insured the car, blah, blah, blah. Like, this is where I would absolutely contest it. And what you can Google, you can also email us, and we're happy to point you in the right direction, is how you contest something that is on your credit report. So what's happening, I think, based on what you're saying, is that Geico is refusing to remove it. So you've done your best to argue with Geico, and they're refusing. Now, there are things I would continue to push with Geico. One of the things that we have seen clients have success with is I would get a list of higher ups at Geico, and I would absolutely utilize social media channels to shame them. I would also send messages on outlets like LinkedIn to actual higher ups at Geico. I actually did this years ago with Toyota before social media was even like a big thing at all. I did it by actually just writing letters to higher ups at Toyota, and had success with a loan that basically I had paid it off, and then they were trying to charge me additional monies after I paid it off. But so that can have some sway, really being loud and noisy on social media. CCing isn't the right term, but including Geico in all of so really shaming them, right? Trying to publicly shame them for what it is that they're doing. But assuming that you have documentation to prove, what I would do is I would contest directly with the credit bureaus. So no longer with Geico, you've tried that. I would contest directly with the credit bureaus and say, this is a debt that I do not owe, and it should be removed. And there is a legal process where Geico must actually respond to your contesting to the credit agencies. So they must respond as to why this is accurate. And in some cases, they simply won't. And then you have the ability to get the credit bureaus themselves to remove it. Okay, so that's a process where you can kind of take the company, or try to kind of take the company out of it, by arguing your case directly to the credit bureaus. And Geico will have a certain period of time to respond. And honestly, what we have seen is that in a certain percentage of the cases, the company won't even respond. Like, it's not worth their time and energy to do that. And then you can go ahead and get it removed. In some cases, they do respond, and you can but basically try and argue the case directly with the credit bureaus. Now, to restore, right? If ultimately you are absolutely on track to be focusing on trying to get it removed, right? Because restoring quickly, that is something that is tough, honestly. What we would have to know is what other things might be affecting your credit that we could bolster, that would essentially kind of cancel out, or at least mitigate that loss. Because if we can't get it removed, the problem is that only time is going to restore. Any of the things out there that say you can pay them to restore your credit and to raise your credit, guys, they are all scams. Because the only thing that can get something off your credit is something that absolutely is contesting something that should not be there. Now, are there people who contest things that should be there and actually get away with it because they contest what should be there and because of the rules, which are that the company has to respond within a certain number of days, and then if they don't respond, then you can push to have it removed? Are there times when that can happen? It can, you guys. But it's one of the places where I want to stress that that can also bite you, because if you antagonize a company for a debt that is legitimately yours, you can get yourself on their list to actually go after you, right? In terms of lawsuits and things like that. So you just want to be careful, and please know, Breakthrough Horizon and everybody, when you ask questions, I'm not remotely like suggesting that this is you. This feels very clear to me that this is a company that is absolutely being dishonest, okay? But I like to use questions to try to speak to a variety of different situations. And everyone, all of these companies that say to you, we can improve your credit, the only thing they can do is what you can actually do yourself, which is to go ahead and say, this is false, this is incorrect, this is inaccurate, this needs to be removed, and provide the documentation that demonstrates that, to have the credit bureaus remove it directly. Okay. If we have time, I'll come back to some other things that can improve your credit score, just that don't have anything to do with this question, but that some folks might find helpful anyway. And a follow-up question here, is it true you have to live at one address for the months of written correspondence? So that's not something that I am familiar with. Now, would I say that if you are arguing a charge on your credit report and you move multiple times in that kind of period of arguing, or move once, I am not aware of that being something that is a rule. The only thing would be that you continue to be able to be contacted, right? So I think it's, as far as I know, and this is definitely something that I will investigate further, but as far as I know, there's no rule that says you must have remained living in one place to be contesting something. Now, there may be something, again, totally probably not what you're asking, but there may be something in the case of a debt or something on a credit report where the company is saying, we were unable to contact you. But again, what I would say is that if you have the documentation in this particular case that shows the car was lost and no longer needed insurance, that proof should be enough for them to get rid of those charges. And so it's going to be about your ability to document it. It's going to be about the proof. It's going to be about when you stopped paying the bill, in what way did you communicate with Geico? that the car was lost? Like, what were those communications? Did you say, the car's lost, it no longer needs to be insured, and they say, well, you have to provide us with this, and then you didn't provide them with it, or they say you didn't? That's the kind of thing that I would say now it's about gathering your evidence, but that you needed to stay at one address. I don't believe that there's any actual law around that. Okay, so hopefully that is helpful. Really, really great question that allows us to dive into a number of different things that folks may face. So here's another question that we got that I love, and we talk about this a lot in our financial empowerment program, because this is something that I think is just, with humans, it's really understandable. After the making financial decisions from clarity session, so I think that is was our mindset session. I've been trying to involve my partner more in our financial decisions. Do you have tips on opening up a dialogue around money without it becoming a point of contention? Excuse me, guys. Okay, great question. One of the biggest sources of tension in relationships is money. And that is, there are many reasons for that, but largely it's because each of us as individuals, we each have our own relationship with money, okay? And the quality of that relationship with money that we each have is going to affect our ability to communicate with other people in our lives about money. And so if you've got two people, in this case a partner, if we've got two people and both of them have challenging individual relationships with money, it is absolutely going to make joint conversations about money very challenging. If one person has a really troubled relationship with money, even if the other person's relationship with money is on the healthier side of the spectrum, it is still going to make communicating challenging, okay? The other thing that's just really important to know, just in terms of forgiving ourselves and having grace with ourselves and with our partners, is that all of us have the right to do money differently, right? To think about money differently, to behave around money differently. And the way that we love to think about this at Abundance Bound is that what you want is you want a relationship with money that leads to behaviors around money that are moving you towards your North Star. And what I mean by your North Star is where you want to go, what is important to you. So we'll often have, particularly as adults, I think it comes from how we are raised, how we in society tend to speak about and deal with money. We often have judgments. We believe that there are good ways of behaving around money and bad ways of behaving around money, right? We believe that the person who goes into the clothing shop and doesn't buy the new outfit, made a good choice, and the person who went into the clothing shop and did buy the new outfit made the less good choice, all the way to bad choice, right? So we have a lot of judgment. And generally, right, what is the financial decision that moves person A towards their North Star can be absolutely different from the financial decision that moves person B towards their North Star. Okay. Now, why am I talking about this to address this person's question? Well, because as a couple, as a partnership, what you do have to come to agreement around is what is your shared North Star, if that makes sense. And that still allows for you each to have one. But when it comes to the things that are important to you as a couple, what you absolutely want to have conversations about is, where do you want to go together? What are the things that are important to you together, right? What are the things that you want to save for together? What are the places that you'd like to go, or the things you want to be able to buy, or the organizations you want to be able to contribute to? Do you want to build a family, to have pets, right? All of these are conversations that you want to have about what are your shared goals, right? Which again can be, and probably should be, a separate conversation than what are your individual goals. I do feel in a partnership, right? Person A, person B, absolutely, person B should be aware of what your shared goals are, and should also be aware of what person A's goals are. Likewise, person A needs to be aware of shared goals and should be aware of person B's goals, okay? But when you ask, do you have tips on opening up a dialogue around money without it becoming a point of contention, I think where the conversation starts is around, what's your shared North Star? What are your shared goals? What's your shared vision? These are really important conversations that actually, if you, as the person who really is interested in leading, right, this area of your lives, if you can actually, for yourself, take the money part out of it for a moment, right? And actually start having the conversation about the shared vision, which can be, I hope you'll see, a really actually fun, dynamic, exciting, inspiring conversation. If you can start by having that conversation, then the money part of it, how can we now together work towards those shared goals? That is far less likely to become a point of contention. Okay. And I think that I hope that this guidance, you can then take it and just expand the guidance. So what do I mean by that? Really looking at having conversations around what makes, for instance, your household run smoothly, right? What are the categories. What are your shared expense categories? Really deciding, again, as a couple, this is a conversation around money, but you can actually have the conversation just around what are the things before it's like, well, we have to be saving this amount or we shouldn't be spending on this. Just literally, what are the expenses that you share? Can you sit down together as a couple and make that list? What are those specific categories? Do you share rent? Do you share mortgage? Do you share groceries? And also saying, like, I think it would really help us both if we also were clear on what are our individual categories, right? What are the categories that we don't share responsibility for? Because that then there's a natural segue into what is the rent? Is the average amount that we're spending on groceries? What is the average amount that we're spending eating out? What are the student loan responsibilities that person A has? What are what's the credit card debt responsibility that partner B has? So that you start to really just be able to look at the truth of the numbers, because the natural extension of that is, how do we best as a partnership make these numbers work? How can I support you? How can you support me? How can we make these numbers work? And it will help you see together where the walls are, where the challenges are. And I think the biggest advice that I would give to the person who wants to involve your partner more in your financial decisions is, again, to approach the conversations from as calm and centered and balanced and non-judgmental place as you possibly can, because that is what will help your partner start to engage in the conversation without feeling attacked or scared or shamed, because they may have a lot of that all on their own, right? And we can all absolutely, most of us can really appreciate that. Most of us don't really need shame coming at us externally, because we've got that covered all by ourselves. And so again, I think the more that we can practice grace with ourselves, it helps us to practice grace with our partners. And it will also help you to see, do you have a partner who right now is truly just unwilling to have the conversation? Because we do see that, right? Someone who is truly unwilling to have the conversation, then we need to have a separate conversation about how you proceed in terms of your own relationship with money. But very often, that's not necessarily the case. It's just that this is an area where many of us need help, right? And I really celebrate, again, for the person who sent in this question, I really celebrate your desire to involve your partner more. And I hope that this helps you to do that. So I know that while we have been addressing these questions, we've had some new people join us on Instagram. We've had more people join us on Facebook, and numbers holding steady on YouTube. So if you are here and you came with any question that you're hoping I can address in these final minutes, please, please go ahead and pop your question in the chat so that I can answer it. Now, another question that we were sent. Okay. After watching the webinar about determining monthly expenses, so this was the one that was called Your Monthly Number, I realized I have several subscriptions I no longer use. How often would you recommend reviewing and adjusting monthly expenses to avoid such oversights? You guys, these are these are just great questions. Okay. So first of all, good for you. Finding those subscriptions that you no longer use. I think that most of us have that. When we did the Your Monthly Number webinar, we really went into detail about identifying all of those expenses on your bank statement, identifying all of those expenses that you could pause, right? That is a really important step. We are not saying you will pause it, right? When we did the Your Monthly Number webinar, I shared my own bank statement. I shared one of my bank statements and we went through the expenses that were on there together, identifying things I could pause, because we're all going to have an emotional reaction. Those of you who were there live, you saw my emotional reaction to, I don't want to pause that. But we're just saying what we could pause. And yes, when we do that, we are likely to find some things that we're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even remember I still had that. So to answer your question, in our financial empowerment program, we recommend that this activity be done twice a year, okay? Twice a year. And the reason for that is that we all have lives that are moving really quickly, and we say yes to things that then when we've had a little bit of space, we may want to revisit. Sometimes also we say yes to things that we've forgotten. And it actually is something that we would really like to take advantage of or utilize. And we've forgotten, like, we're very busy people. Life moves at a very quick pace. And so I really feel like this grounded moment, roughly every 6 months, it's just an opportunity to make sure that you're on track with your priorities, okay? Now, a huge thing in our financial empowerment program that is one of the foundational principles of being abundance bound is really that you are regularly checking in with where your money is going. And if you're regularly checking in with where your money is going, if you utilize a tracking system, which is so valuable, guys, for all of us as non-traditional earners, because again, we're up to so much in the world that I want you, yes, to think about money, but I want you to be able to do it quickly and efficiently and peacefully, and having a tracking system will help you to do that. But if I have a tracking system, then a part of my job on a weekly or bi-weekly or certainly monthly basis is to be in that tracking system, actually making sure that everything is appropriately categorized. And in doing that, that means that when I'm making sure everything is going to be appropriately categorized, I have a quick moment of, oh, do I still want that thing, right? That I am making sure I'm appropriately categorizing. So that is kind of built into the financial systems that we think are such an important part of being abundance bound. But taking 45 minutes to an hour every 6 months to just run your eye down your bank statements, saying, what was that? What was that? What was that? What was that? It's really going to be a quick process, right? That moment of, do I still want that thing? Do I still need that thing? Am I still utilizing that thing? Is that thing still in line with my values, with the things that are important to me? That's a really valuable process and is a really important part of a strong and healthy relationship with money. It's just taking those moments to say, am I utilizing my resources in a way that best supports who I want to be in the world? Okay. One of the things that was a gift of the extremely challenging and in some cases horribly painful time of the pandemic, but one of the things that was a gift was that for many of us, expenses stopped that we had stopped questioning a long time ago. Expenses stopped simply by force because we weren't allowed to do them anymore, that we just didn't question anymore, that it just became, if you had come to me and said, Miata, do you really need that thing? I would have been like, of course I do. That's a really important part of my life. There were things I stopped at the start of the pandemic that I was absolutely certain I would start again when the pandemic ended, that a year and a half, 2 years later, were no longer important to me, were no longer a part of what I valued, right? Now, there were some new expenses that came in as a result of what I learned about myself and how I grew and changed during the pandemic. But as I said, there were things I let go of. So, my advice, my answer to this question is every 6 months. And instead of seeing it as like this, job you have to sit down and make yourself do, I would really celebrate it as an opportunity to just connect with how you are choosing to utilize your resources in this period of your life. And just making sure that those things line up, it'll actually feel really good. And I think in some cases, you'll really feel lighter, a lightness of shedding the things that just no longer line up with who you are, what you're up to, and what's most important to you in this phase of your life. Okay? So fabulous, fabulous questions, you guys, today. There are a couple of minutes left. I'm just going to make one more call. If there's anybody who's here live who wants to pop a question in the chat, please do. And while I wait to just see if there's any final question, I will remind everybody that on Wednesday, that will be our next live, completely free webinar in our series, our Riding the Storm series. This webinar is called Your Runway, and we will be specifically looking at how do you figure out in this time of crisis of the strikes or in any time of crisis, how do you figure out what your runway is? That is the amount of time you can survive, really, if you were to earn no more money, okay? And then what we're going to be looking at is strategically, how can you increase that length of time So I want to remind you that you can click on the link in our bio and you can register to join us for that webinar on Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. If you are unable to click on the link in our bio, please just email us at info at abundancebound.com. Okay, you can email us there and say, I'd like the link either to register for the upcoming webinar or the link to watch the recording of the very first webinar that we did, which is your financial survival guide during the strikes. I also want to remind everybody that the Taming Your Debt recording is only available until this coming Wednesday at midnight Pacific. The Taming Your Debt webinar, I went into such detail on establishing a debt plan and what options exist for consolidation and formal debt management and all of that. But we are taking that recording down at midnight Pacific on Wednesday, September 20th. So please, again, email us if that is a recording you would like to see, or just click the link in our bio if you're joining us on Instagram, and you can grab that recording as well. You can also, the folks who sent us questions to address this week, some of them we got via direct message on either Facebook or Instagram, and a couple of them were emailed. So you can feel free to email us questions in advance, or just keep track of your questions, show up live. As we saw with Breakthrough Horizons question today, it's really great if you have a question and you're able to come live, because otherwise I'm just going to sort of go down a tangent based on what I think you're asking. And of course, your ability to clarify to make sure that I get you the answer you need. I want to give you the help that is truly, truly useful for you. Okay, that's what these lives are for. Thank you all for another great Friday. Again, I am committed to going live for open Q&As. It's coaching, financial coaching time, every Friday, 1 p.m. Pacific, for as long as these strikes continue. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.